For the first 30 seconds after the bang, the other pilots didn't say a word. The alarms continue, they won't stop. There's so many distractions. 21 out of 22 systems were affected. I couldn't track the number of failures and their knock-on effects. Inverting the logic says instead of wondering about what's failed, focus on what's working. You just need enough wings, a few brakes, a few flight controls. My whole mood changed because it became predictable.
My name's Grant Chisnall and I'm the CEO and founder of Left of Boom. If anyone on this planet personifies Left of Boom, it's today's guest, Richard de Crespigny. True resilience is not just about preparing for the worst case, but building your adaptive capacity to embrace uncertainty and seize opportunity, not just survival, but greater capability, sharper judgment, and a deeper understanding of what it takes to lead when the script runs out. Richard's experience on QF32 produced not just a safe landing for 469 people, but 2 books, a framework for human performance, and a set of ideas about crisis, decision-making, and resilience that organisations everywhere are still catching up to. Today, we're going to explore his life before Qantas Flight 32, the flight itself, and his life as an expert in resilience and human performance since. Richard de Crespigny, welcome to Left of Boom.
Thanks, Grant. Great to be with you.
So, Richard, a lot of work that you're doing now is around that human performance and preparedness for those worst case moments. Can you talk to us about what resilience means to you and how you really work with different organisations and people to enhance their resilience for those?
Sure, Grant. I think resilience, my definition of resilience is that when things go wrong, you can absorb it. It's like a wheel hitting a brick on the road. The suspension comes up, absorbs the impact, and then the tyre goes back down onto the road and you continue. So that is absorbing things that go wrong and surviving. That's the minimum requirement. But ideally, we want to learn from our things that go wrong and always develop. And in fact, the aim is not just to survive a crisis, but to come out stronger. You learn from it, you come out stronger. There are many cases where companies just barely survive a crisis, and there are many examples of where people come out of a crisis stronger. For example, half the prime ministers in Australia lost a parent, either orphaned or lost one of their parents in their early childhood. And so these people, some people could be crushed by this, and I know people that have been crushed by losing a parent. Other people come out stronger. So that's where we want to be. And resilience can apply personally, corporately, nationally, existentially. And we've seen, we're not born with any of these skills. We have to learn them. And I think a lot of people think that there are others that are naturally good, like governments are good at it. But we've seen what's happened with the oil reserves and certainly the military at the moment. We are not resilient, and even governments get it very wrong, and as we're discovering today.
How important is that long-term investment, from your early life coming into and leading up to before QF32? Talk us through some of the experiences that you went through and built yourself up for that moment, for those 4 hours that you had to really deal with that whole crisis.
I think, I wrote 2 books. One was called QF32, about the incident. And people said, well, why did you make this decision? Why did you do this? You should have done something else. So I have to answer that. And so I wrote a book about that. And as I was going into the book, I realized I've got to go back to my early childhood. So really the story of resilience is about your life and how you face challenges, how you build up the elements of resilience, so that this is all Left of Boom stuff, isn't it? Exactly. The way your book describes it perfectly. Resilience is all about preparation first, right? And I talk about the elements of resilience as being 8 elements, right? Knowledge, training, experience, teamwork, leadership, decision-making, crisis management, and risk. So this is what we need personally, corporately, nationally, and these things like knowledge, training, experience are built up over our life. So I can say that the trajectory of my life set me up. In fact, Sally Sullenberger, who landed in the Hudson, he said, look, it was just lucky on the day when he talked to the National Transport Safety Bureau investigators. And one of the investigators said, no, Sally, you're wrong. We can tell that you've been preparing for this event every day of your life because you kept so calm. So Left of Boom, preparation, identifying the threats, building up SOPs for normal stuff, building up skills to create novel solutions when things go wrong. OODA loops that you probably use.
Yeah,
this is
Boyd
all.
cycle,
This is
love
all
it.
the preparation when the bang occurs. All you have to do is bring the team together. Because individuals will never be resilient. Individuals make errors. Errors part of the human condition.
Yeah.
And as good as anyone might think they are, they are always have a very narrow focus on all the senses. The brain only responds to 1 in 10 million senses that come into the brain at a time. There are 4 million nerves coming up to the brain. We only register a few because we have such little capacity. So a human will miss a lot. Teams can be resilient. Humans, a single individual, can't. And then when the crisis hits to the right of boom, we're making decisions based using all those elements of resilience. That's how we survive. If we do it well, when the crisis happens, and I think QF32 was a great example of that because it was a team success.
Yeah.
We did team. And together we made all the right decisions. I wouldn't change one decision that we made. We made hundreds.
Yeah.
That's a credit to the team. And so the right of boom for us turned out very well.
Didn't it?
And the brand of the airline, the brand of Qantas came out of QF32 stronger than before.
Yeah.
So
despite
that's
this probably being the most highest potential incident they've encountered in recent history, I think, and even since. So the fact that
there was a lot of faults, and we took off with $4 billion US of insurance for all the passengers on that aircraft. That could have been the potential payout.
$4 billion.
And $4 billion, and in the end, not a single passenger was hurt. There was no. Qantas didn't pay out 1 cent after QF32. Well, they did pay for an engine that they had to destroy to shut it down.
Yeah.
But apart from that, I mean, Qantas got out of it with really the insurance got out of QF32 without paying a cent. It was a great resilience story, and that's why I've been fascinated about resilience. I one of the chapters when I first started putting it together, I had a chapter called Leadership and Teamwork.
Yep.
Because you have to have
work
that,
together.
and a good leader is always a good team player, right?
Starts with that.
But
always.
then Donald Trump was elected, so I had to break that up into 2 chapters.
Yeah.
Because not all leaders are good team players, and you will not be resilient if you don't have teamwork. So it's a remarkable journey, and I love talking about it, and I'd love reading your book. And whether you focus left of boom, or if you focus left of boom, then the boom and right of boom takes care of itself.
Yeah, and in our perspective, that right of boom is really the outcome of everything you've done before. So it could be the contributing factor for why you've had the crisis to start with too. But on the other side of the fence, left of boom starts with your purpose, your why, and your values as a starting point, because they then form the things that are most important to you that you must either protect or enable and embrace. The way you've reframed resilience about not just about being prepared for that worst case, but also being about prepared to seize opportunity. I think that state of being is really more important now than we've ever seen it before as we're facing towards AI and the challenges that present.
Well, so you said a few interesting things. You said the why.
Yeah.
Right? So everyone listening to this must look at the Simon Sinek video
to.
that goes for 14 minutes, right? About the why. That's critical. The reason this is interesting is because when I was writing the second book, I talked to the CEO and I said, look, I'm writing this thing about leadership. And you said that in the board of Qantas that the directors are responsible to the shareholders. And he said, that's right. And I said, well, I think you're wrong. So I said that to the CEO.
Yeah.
And so he became quite surprised. But I'm exactly right. You'll go to jail if you don't look after act in the best interest of the company. So the why is important. If you don't have your why, if you're a leader, and all the people listening to this is probably leaders of people, you have to know your why. And your why is not to look after the shareholders, right? Your why is to look after the company. In my why was to look after the passengers on the aircraft. Now, so you have to understand, your why will tell you your values, and that your values decide who you're responsible to, who you are accountable to. So on QF32, I'm responsible to the passengers. I could handcuff the CEO, and I'd be quite happy to. And I did tell the other captains what they needed to do, right? you have to know who you're responsible to. I'm accountable to Qantas. They feel free to sack me after the flight, but during the flight, I'm the leader. I'm responsible. Everyone must follow my decisions, right? So I'm who you're responsible to, who you're accountable. Only when you answer those two questions will you understand the authority, because we see people who can't make a decision because they don't know their authority. When you're working with a narcissist, you have to either be a sycophant, and we're seeing plenty of that, because they're weak, or you have to hide, or you have to run away. And so that decision of where you sit in a situation and what authority you're going to take, you can only know the authority you're going to take. It'll only be clear if you understand who you're responsible to, who you're accountable to, which comes back to your values. So these are really basic things. But in Qantas, in GE, in Boeing, they got that wrong. They got shareholder capitalism, the boards becoming a financial, legal organisation rather than Boeing being an engineering company, and we saw how that went. Life is be very complicated, particularly if you've got to make a decision, if you can't answer those first two questions.
I could not agree more. I loved the interview that you did with John Mullen, and John Mullen was the chair of Toll Group, which went through the group cyber attacks back in 2020.
And John agreed with me about board responsibility.
100% he did. And he's now on Qantas' board.
There's a chap called John Connolly who does crisis management. And he, I did a podcast with him. He came out many times saying the only key to crisis management is to know that you must act in the best interest of the company and not the shareholder.
And I think that's the challenge when you are confronted by crises, because as you've said in your book too, there's that flight, fight reflex, or that startle reflex. And your response in those moments as an individual, especially as a leader, can be determined by your values. And so that responsibility and accountability is an important starting point, I think, to understand before you even take over that leadership role, because at the end of the day, you are the one in the hot seat. What do you say to people about understanding what that means and the distinction between that, and what sort of lessons do you take, especially from your time in the Air Force, learning about those responsibility and accountability?
Okay, now this is critical information. And I talked about the second book, The Elements, Resilience, those 8 elements, knowledge, training, experience. But the first chapter in my book is about neuroscience. Because you have to understand how the brain, the hardware is set up, and the mind, the software works. If you don't understand the brain and the mind, you won't understand how you're performing. You might join a queue of people fighting over toilet paper when there's a trivial crisis, or fighting over fuel. How do you explain people fighting for toilet paper? It's simple, because you have the lizard brain, the amygdala. It's very fast. It's been in all animals, and it creates the fear response of fight, flight, fear. Responds to an unexpected event. And so if you're not aware of this, when say a thunderclap happens, people might be scared, and the amygdala triggers cortisol and that fear response. You don't want to have a fear response if you are in a leadership position. But what humans have is a much bigger cortex than animals, and the cortex is 1/10 of the speed. Can draw on all the resources. Takes a long time to come on board. The amygdala responds in 20 milliseconds. The cortex takes about half a second. That's why you can have subliminal marketing, right? Because the subliminal marketing is targeting the amygdala, and your cortex, your consciousness, is not even aware it's being approached. So we have to understand the cortex, that it adds value, brings all this knowledgeable part of resilience into it, so we can regulate the amygdala, stop the fear response, keep in charge, and lead in that for pilots in the first 30 seconds, when the cortex is not online. If you don't do the right thing, you're dead. If you're in the army and someone starts shooting, if you panic and freeze, you're dead. All right? So it's important that certainly for people in a critical industry where they have to survive the first 30 seconds, that you understand the fear response, the amygdala, the cortex. This is part of the biggest subject you'll ever face in your life, which is called human factors. Human factors is, and anyone can study this. Pilots have to, and the military must study this intently, because you won't survive if you don't understand how you as a human and other humans in the teams function and how to get the best out of them. So the human factors is how the body's built, the makeup of it, how it responds to things that affect it, what it can do, to change the environment, and lastly, how you build equipment to work with it. So that's a very simple 4-point summary of human factors.
Yep.
It explains how you build an aircraft cockpit so the pilots don't get confused and take the wrong switch.
Yep.
It explains why we should build up reserves so we train the things that scare us so they don't scare us in future. That's building up habits. And so this is part of human factors so you don't have the fear response. So when people, there's that quote, isn't it? The wartime plan lasts until the first shot. So when that first shot and the fear response comes in, you need to understand these human factors.
We really struggle with, and our clients struggle with, dedicating the time to really good preparation. They're time poor. Crisis training is often a requirement that they obviously understand and accept and also agree with, as well as embracing in many industries we work with. But it's also time away from their day-to-day business. How important is optimising that time that you are taking in training?
Well, I think it's interesting. I have a little boat, and sometimes you have to moor the boat to a jetty, and things happen very quickly as you get close to the jetty. And sometimes people may know someone who gets on a sailing boat and they start to scream.
Yeah.
When a leader starts to scream or yell out orders, what it means is they've never briefed the crew, right? The crew don't know what to do, and the leader gets stressed and he yells. So any leader that's yelling both exposes the fact that he didn't brief the team beforehand to say what happened. If you're moving a bit of furniture, you say, now the aim is we're going to move this furniture, we're going to rotate it clockwise, we move it here. Everyone knows what they're going to do before they lift it up, right? So anytime a leader is starting to shout, it means they've probably got bad leadership, they haven't prepared the team, and also they don't understand that when you do shout, you actually create this, you're targeting the fear response, the cortisol's coming up, or the whole team gets angry and you get a worse result. The idea is with a team is that you have this thing called a shared mental model.
Yep.
You know exactly what's happening,
Yep.
what has happened, what's about to happen, and what your part of it is. This is all part of great leadership. Now, if you do that training for a crisis, you prepare, you train the things that scare you so they don't scare you.
Yep.
You practice builds habits. We're born with instincts,
Yep.
but learning to walk, hitting a tennis racket are habits that happen subconsciously. So we can multitask the brain. All the habits go into the cerebellum at the back of the brain.
Yep.
And so that's acting subconsciously.
Yep.
And you can do all these things. You don't appreciate just how long it takes to program that cerebellum,
Yeah.
but it's now operating by itself autonomously. And then you can use the cortex to think through it. So practice these things till they become habits.
Yep.
And then when the boom, that's left the boom again. When
Yep.
the boom hits,
Yep.
people will do these habitual responses that it can be as fast as instincts, and they'll survive.
They'll often talk about trying to build that muscle memory. But my father was a football coach and football player at the top level throughout his whole career, and he always, I think, as under Ron Barassi as well, who had that old saying of perfect practice makes perfect, rather than just practice makes perfect. You use a term called stress-proof deliberate practice.
That's right.
Can you explain what that means and how important that is for training your brain for those worst-case moments?
Pilots have to do their checks every 2 months.
Yeah.
We have 7 license checks a year. If we fail that license check, we don't fly, our pay goes to half. So it's very stressful. Just imagine having the police commissioner in the back of your car every 2 months to keep driving on the road. So, so we have to practice so we keep our skill level up. We go into simulators and we do the difficult things. We have to be able to survive engine failures and depressurizations, all kinds of complex things. Now, and the instructor is told if the student has gets the aircraft to destination, if he follows the SOPs, standard procedures, then he passes. Now it's very possible.
Yeah.
You could have an engine failure, you get the aircraft down on the ground, the instructor says, "Great, you pass."
Yeah.
Because you know you're shaking. And you said, oh, that was terrible. I didn't like that. I just survived it. I'm going to shut up and I hope I never see it again.
Yeah.
Now, you are proficient according to the system. You can go flying.
Yeah.
You're not comfortable.
No.
You're not confident. You're not courageous. And if something goes wrong, you're going to still feel a victim in the situation.
Yeah.
You got to get yourself. You got to get yourself to. So being an expert is to deliver expertise on demand.
Yeah.
So in the case, deliberate practice is doing the things that are hard, stressful, outside your comfort zone. It's always pushing yourself. You must commit to a lifetime of learning. So you must always keep challenging yourself and building up your skill sets. Now, that's called deliberate practice, and many people have written about that. So, and that's what we do in the aircraft. I always push myself more. Once I pass the simulator, I say to the instructor, knock up the turbulence, knock up the crosswind to the absolute limits and turn off some instruments to make it the hardest possible. I'm trying to do deliberate practice to make myself more capable than I have to be for the license. So when when something goes wrong, I'm not stressed.
Yeah.
You know, the winds are, and I've struck it being in an aircraft where the wind is a maximum crosswind, and we're going into Melbourne. We've come out of Los Angeles or Dallas. There's very little fuel left. We've only got one approach. If we do a missed approach, we'll declare an emergency, minimum fuel, come back and land, and the wind's at maximum crosswind. And some of the other pilots are really sweating.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, that's okay. I can do that. Now, that's deliberate practice. But the aim is you do these difficult things and you do them until they don't stress you. This is the difference. That first flight in a simulator, you said, well, I'd never want to see that again. No, you keep doing it until it doesn't stress you, till it becomes part of a habit.
Yeah.
Now, that means the ideal way to do that is to put a stress sensor on you, look at your pupils, which is like a view into the soul, or sweat, saliva, blood test. There are many ways to calculate stress, but the idea is stress-proof deliberate practice is to repeat things that are difficult until you do them effortlessly. You're confident. You're not overconfident.
No.
As Paul Keating said, it's well-earned confidence, all right? You're courageous. You can make intrepid decisions. You're unafraid to go into Melbourne with the crosswind at the maximum because you know you'll get it on the ground.
In those crew environments, and especially with the air crew that you're dealing with, how important is it understanding those different mindsets and the different performance mindsets from each of the other individuals, especially when you're looking at delegation or load shedding in those critical moments?
In the airline, we're very fortunate because all the other pilots, if you're my co-pilot, I've never met you before. On QF32, there were 5 pilots. I'd only flown with 2 of them once before. The safest flight in an airline is if you've never flown with anyone before. Now, that's going to stun someone. If I see an anaesthetist, and I know a person, she's an anaesthetist, she says, I only work with this one doctor. That just throws up the biggest alarm bells. It means that they're normalising all these deviations. They understand each other. They're not going to challenge each other. They're too friendly. And so they're normalising deviance is just terrible. So that really sent an alarm. If you can't work with anyone else, danger, danger. So when I get in the cockpit, I'll say to the other pilots, I don't know you, Grant. You seem like a nice guy, but that's irrelevant, right? I want you to be SOP. I will be SOP. I'm going to know what you're going to do. You're going to know what I'm going to do. And that's perfect, isn't it? So let's just all be SOP, and then everything is predictable. So the safest flight in Qantas is when you've never flown with the other pilots before.
That's fascinating. So Atul Gawande speaks about, in the Checklist Manifesto, talks about, again, teams in that operating theatre environment coming together for the first time, often for a surgery, and had the same observation about incorporating that team to start with. But what they did do to encounter that, or to start the whole process in an appropriate way, was have a briefing. I'm so-and-so, I'm the nurse, this is my role today, this is how I'm going to be contributing to the outcome of the surgery. And
it was a good book, just saying checklists are great. But he didn't really go into the human factors
Not
of
as
it,
much
right?
as yours,
Because
no.
there are many surgery where they say, let's pull out this United Nations checklist. And they say, introduce yourself to each other. And the surgeon says, oh, no, I know everyone, it's okay. I mean, there are plenty of, in the surgery, there are plenty of times when the nurses give the tool to the wrong person. They don't know who the other people are, what their jobs are. So a checklist is only good if you follow it,
Yep.
And number two, you can't say, oh, no, we ignore this step because everyone knows each other. No, it's a total fail.
Yeah.
So the human factors is important.
Yep.
And if the checklist, if that part of the checklist is not satisfied, you don't continue, you stop. So the human factors that surrounds checklists is just as important as a checklist itself.
Yeah, I interviewed a friend of mine as well, Bill Bestick, who's now an anaesthetist, who's also now just done his helicopter pilot's license, who was also, prior to that, an SAS troop commander, and after his military career was a KNR, or kidnap and ransom hostage negotiator. So an underachiever from all.
He likes stress.
He's
addicted
person,
to cortisol.
And he has talked about all those environments and the effects across all of those and the importance of exactly what you just said. So it does reinforce that need to have that human performance understanding as well as part of the whole process. And they have a lot of issues that he's seeing within especially in the medical industry, a lot of deviations, a lot of incidents, which unfortunately, because they're not having that background of even debriefing in order to learn and improve, they're missing a lot of opportunities to improve the whole industry themselves as well.
I learned a really good lesson. I went to fly helicopters in the Sinai in Egypt, and a Kiwi pilot came up, and he was actually the new squadron commander. And he said, "I'll go flying with you, Richard. You're in charge, and I'm only just arrived." So we flew the helicopter. And the end of the sector, he said, "Richard, that was great. Just one question. I noticed that you did the checklist in this order of going through the panels, and the checklist has it going in another way. Is there a reason why you prefer your system you use?" And I just said, he floored me. I said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. If the checklist isn't right, change it."
Yeah.
I had no right to go through the panels on the pre-flight in the different order to the checklist.
Yeah.
He embarrassed me in the most amazing way without actually being rude. And I realised that he was confused because I didn't do it the right way.
Yeah.
And all I had to do was to follow the standard procedures. If they're not right, change them. But when they do work, and standard procedures work in standard times when there's no failures. When there's a critical event, if it's not handled by SOPs, then you have to create a system. Then your resilience really comes to play. I think the standard operating procedures everyone should understand. The briefing's important.
Yep.
People all the work's done in front. So then when you start executing, you can do it quietly. On an aircraft, when things go wrong, the cockpit gets quiet. Because people are now getting into the way of managing the checklist. It gets very quiet. As we came to land in QF32, which was the most critical phase, I'm the only person. Matt and I are saying only a couple of words. It's about 90%, 95% silence because we're all working so hard. And you don't want people annoying you and talking.
Got goosebumps thinking about that moment, not just with what was at stake, but also just the fact that in those critical moments, that trust between you clearly was there to get you to that last sort of landing point. Talk us through some of the hours in that, the 2.5 hours before that, where that whole situation did unravel.
I think the word trust is really important. You have to have trust to everyone to do their role. And going out in the bus to the airport, there would be 3 pilots flying and 2 captains coming to check me. We had a check captain training, a check captain to check me. And I said to the other 2 pilots, the first officer and the second officer, look, we have these 2 captains that are in the cockpit. And first point is they are a distraction, right? They're checking me. That's my problem. We are the crew. The 3 of us are the crew, and we are to ignore those people, okay? And I will make mistakes. I don't plan to make mistakes, but I will make mistakes because I'm human. And so it's important. The important thing here, the why, is the safety of the passengers. So when I make a mistake, don't worry about the check captains recognizing I've made a mistake. You must tell me so we fix it. And if you don't tell me, I will punish you. So you must. And so what I'm doing is I'm telling the other people in the team, I'm fallible, I'm vulnerable, I need them in the team. They need to tell me when things are wrong so we fix it, because the aim is the safety of the passengers. And so I'm bringing them into the team. Even the guy who's only been in Qantas for a couple of years, the most junior person, I'm inviting him into the team. I'm inviting him to be critical of me. And when people do highlight mistakes that I make, I'll say thank you. And so that approach to both the teamwork, things going wrong, people making errors, I think it's really important you start off being vulnerable and humble and saying, I really need you to work together as a team. And so when they do say something, they're doing it for the right reason. They're not doing it to attack you as a leader.
No.
They're doing it because they want the outcome to be successful, and you must listen to them. If you, as a leader, have the right to stop them from doing something because you are the leader, you have to give them the right to stop you, the leader, when you're not doing something right.
That builds trust in its own right because it enables them and embraces them in that moment to give you the right feedback for the outcome and the why that you said. So I think you mentioned in your book there's a paragraph around humility and the importance of it.
Yeah.
And I think Elon Musk recently came out and said that humility is not an attribute you want as a leader. I couldn't think more the opposite in that sort of term.
You can be confident, but you should be able to reason through a decision.
Yeah.
If you can't reason through it, maybe you don't know enough.
Exactly. And I think that as a result, humility, empathy, that ability to understand the other people around you is a crucial element in leadership.
Now, decision-making is an element of resilience. And so I mentioned we've got instincts, then habits, and then intuition, and then there's the OODA loop, and we work up to very long decision-making. There are so many ways to make decisions. Some decisions, as a leader, you'll just have to make.
Yeah.
And we did that I did it on the aircraft. I didn't have time to explain it. You don't have to enter into a big, long discussion with people for every decision. And sometimes a decision is made quickly and there's no negotiation.
Yeah.
So that's all part of understanding that and saying, this is it, just do it, right? Sometimes you have to do it. We have to understand those different levels of decision-making and employ the right one at the right time because then we'll get the optimum solution.
That helps avoid analysis paralysis. Not making those decisions, those critical decisions. What was that first critical decision that you made in that moment on QF32?
Oh, after the bang?
Yeah.
Well, in fact, it all follows standard operating procedures, even though the explosion, because no one said a word. There's a fear response. So I had to make sure we pilots do a thing called aviate, navigate, communicate. Aviate, stay alive, right? Fly the airplane. Don't worry about the checklist. If someone's firing at you with a gun, aviate to a soldier will be get your head down, right?
Hard cover, quick.
And the next thing is navigate, find a safe place. We're above the mountains, get the aircraft to a place where it won't crash in the mountains. And then we communicate, then we talk. So for the first 30 seconds after the bang, the other pilots didn't say a word. They were watching me. I was getting the aircraft under control. I had to disconnect things and make sure the aircraft didn't overspeed, get a constant altitude, a constant path, be above the hills. And then I said, we're above the mountains, we're at a constant altitude, constant heading, we are safe. ECAM actions. Now, ECAM actions means that Matt, the first officer, can now have because everyone's been monitoring me to make sure I'm doing this aviate, navigate, communicate.
And you got two
and we're staying alive.
Too.
And everyone's silent. The alarms are going off. We're trying to cancel it. There's all kinds. The alarms continue. They won't stop. There's so many distractions. And I'm the only one saying altitude hold, heading hold, as I'm configuring the aircraft. And they're silent, just making sure we're staying alive. And then after 30 seconds, we said, okay, Matt, follow the checklist. So now he can go head down, look at the checklist. So that prioritization in the emergency is critical when that fear response can come in. And so things was probably... Well, from the aspect of people talking, no one else was talking. That came in as the checklist started going. And we did about 120 checklists. So, we had 2 hours of the crisis in the air, another 2 hours on the ground. Then we had another 2 hours of debriefing on the ground for the passengers. QF32 was a 6-hour emergency. There you go. And I could easily talk to you for 6 hours about it.
I'd love to. So when so the ECAM overload was probably one of the other things that really came through in both of your books and in the story itself. How did you sort of make that captain's call essentially in that moment around, well, we are in a safe position now. We are aviating, navigating, communicating. How did you then sort of start to think, okay, well now how do we overload this decision or this desire to land the aircraft quickly? which might have been an overwhelming desire in some circumstances. It may have been a challenge. I don't know what other people have said.
Well, half the pilots would say,
Yep.
absolutely, we did the wrong thing. We should have just thrown the aircraft on the ground.
Put it back down on the ground.
Right?
Yeah.
And half the pilots would say, you absolutely did the wrong thing. You should have got the passengers off the aircraft straight away. Right? Now, that's fine. Everyone can have an opinion.
Yeah.
But I have reasons
We know
why.
what opinions are like.
I have reasons why we did different things.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's time, like now perhaps, or there's still not enough, where I can describe why they did things. Sometimes you just have to do it.
Yeah.
So we had 40 checklists queued up in the first second. We didn't know that. And so when Matt's starting to run through the checklist, they're prioritised, they're interactive. We're doing engine fires, then hydraulic failures, fuel system was a mess. The 21 out of 22 systems were affected. So Matt's running through all these terrible checklists and he said, look, can we go back to Singapore, which was a great idea. So we took up a holding pattern because there was actually a famous flight. It was LR flight out of Amsterdam in 1992 where 2 engines came off the left-hand wing. It damaged the wing. That jumbo kept flying around happily in the holding pattern. They came into land, and as they deployed the flaps to come in to slow down the land, they had asymmetric flaps, asymmetric lift. The aircraft rolled inverted, crashed into a parking block, everyone killed. Now, that's a manual aircraft, a jumbo's manual. The A380 is fly-by-wire, networked, electric, computerized, software written by people straight out of uni, and people would say, oh, yes, but computers are pearls in, pearls out. No. Pilots are skeptical. It's garbage in, garbage out. So we have to understand not just what the aircraft is doing now with all these failures, but how it's going to react in 2 hours when we've kind of got to land. We have to try and predict how the aircraft is going to present to us and make sure that we don't roll inverted coming in on finals. So we had to do all these things that many of them were not in any manuals, right? We did control checks, which I didn't have time to explain to the other pilots. That would take too long. But we had to guarantee the aircraft would land in the approach configuration. So I did that stuff. You have a situation awareness of knowing where you were, where you are, where you're going to be. And with all these failures, I lost that. I got overloaded. And I couldn't track the number of failures and their knock-on effects because 2 failures might combine to make a third failure, which the checklist
hadn't considered.
They're not meant. It's not designed for that. So I lost the ability to keep track of the aeroplane, understand what I was doing, and so then 2 things happened. I went to climb to 10,000 feet. I said to air traffic, get us inside 30 miles and we want to climb to 10,000. And they said, absolutely. That was because I was mitigating. The fear was, and the fuel system was such a mess, it would never make sense, and the checklists were wrong for that, which we ignored. But my point is, if you can't guarantee fuel, you can't guarantee flight. So I had to set up that if we lost all the engines, we could glide back to Singapore. I'd known that you have to plan for the worst. You hope for the best. And the second thing I did was to invert the logic. This is not in any book. Inverting the logic says, on an A380, $400 million, 4 million parts, and a lot were failing. You can't keep track of all that. There are a lot of black boxes that you don't know how they're configured. You don't know what they do inside. You don't know how they degrade. So inverting the logic says, instead of wondering about what's failed, focus on what's working. Because in a complex situation, you're going to have to make decisions without all the facts. I mean, you must have been well and truly trained well on that.
Definitely.
So you have to observe and orientate and just do the best you can with the information you have. When you invert the logic, instead of looking at an A380 with 21 systems and 4 million parts, you just need enough wings, a few brakes, a few flight controls. And look, this was not my idea. Right? We did invert the logic. Instead, we had 8 out of 11 fuel tanks broken, but we had 3 fuel tanks working. So it worked out we had 3 hours of flight. Well, that's pretty good. So when you invert the logic, you take all these failures, you can actually, you're doing a junkyard wars build of an aeroplane from junk, which was a 380. And we just had enough. So we could do it. So when you invert the logic, everything became calm and understandable, and my whole mood changed because it became predictable. Now, this is not my idea. This is Gene Kranz, Apollo 13. Look at the Apollo 13 movie. After that oxygen tank exploded on Apollo 13, Gene Kranz could see in Houston at mission control that all these controllers are melting down. Too many sensors, too many alarm bells. They couldn't track it. They were confused and frightened. Gene stood up and said, "Gentlemen, stop wondering about what's failed. Focus on what's working." And when they did that, they got their mental situational awareness back. We learned from these things. That's what I did. And it just changed the whole situation. So a lot of people take a lot out of that. And because in life, all the confusion that's going on at the moment in so many disruptive areas, sometimes inverting the logic works really well.
It helps break the cycle, I think, and that's the thing that really stuck out for me about the way you describe inverting the logic. We try and build that into practice with our clients by red teaming or blue teaming. And often we do focus around red teaming, which is about the negatives. So what is wrong? What is happening? What's going on? What's the potential consequences of these situations? Was gene cramps in your mind? What was the trigger that you managed to peg in that moment that sort of made you think, okay, now I can invert the logic?
It just happened.
Yeah.
I didn't think of it.
Yep.
And it just happened. After we landed, I said to the other pilots, golly, I inverted the logic. And it really helped.
Yeah.
And because I listened to the recording from the cockpit. But it just happened. And so I didn't think about it at the time. And so that's the interesting thing, that this knowledge training experience.
Yeah.
This is where we were doing many things that were not and even the discussion of how we debrief the passengers.
Yeah.
None of this stuff, the control checks, none of this stuff was in the Airbus manuals or Qantas manuals. But if you really are an expert and you commit to a lifetime of learning, you're going to discover from reading about other people's experiences, what they did, what worked. You will build up your own set of tools in your toolbox for life that are outside any manual that you might just deploy one day and will make the big difference.
We talk about Ride a Boom being respond, reassure and recover. That reassure element, I love the story in your book about what you do to help passengers who are scared of flying prepare for flights. Reassuring came from that opportunity, or the inverting the logic, because you're able to then focus on the positives in that moment, which then reassured you as a crew, no doubt, but also what else did you then do to reassure the people in the back around what was going through in that moment, both then and on the ground?
Fear has about many vectors, and it's the confusion. You don't know what's happening. You can't see out the front. You don't know who's in charge. You fear the worst because you don't know it. You say, well, there's a rumble. The wings are falling off. The brakes are falling off. We're going to die. Yeah. And you think it's unfair. The scale, why me? I've done nothing wrong. This is unfair. And then you say, well, and there's no one to contact. Good luck finding a phone number for Qantas on the website, right? There's no one to contact. There's no one saying, I'm in charge, I'll look after you. Yeah. Right? So you are helpless. Yeah. All these things contribute to fear of anything, right? Yeah. Mice, of aircraft, of any fear of anything is based on those different vectors. Now, if you understand that, you realize now what you've got to do is counter all those things. So you give people information, say why you're doing things. You give reasons. Giving reasons is really important. If I give a reason, I'm about to buy shares in SpaceX because even though it's this multiple of the income, it's a lot. I think it's going to do great things in future. It's going to be one of the biggest companies in the world. And so people say, well, look, I don't even agree with it, but I understand it. It makes sense. That's fine. Yeah. I don't think you're a total nutcase. So giving reasons is really important in a crisis because it will allay people's fears. You have to show that you're in charge. And the final thing that I did that made a really big difference. Remember this single point of contact, no one's taking responsibility. Yeah. I did what I call, which again, everyone in Qantas, not just half, everyone in Qantas thought I was nuts. I said to the passengers, get a pen and paper out. And here's my mobile phone number. If you think that Qantas hasn't looked after you, or if you think that they don't care, now that's a really important word, care. If you think that the airline's not caring for you, all subjective things in the receiver's mind, then here's my phone number, call me and I'll fix it. So I'm showing vulnerability and humility, because if I said a lie, they'd ring and abuse me. If I didn't say enough, they'd ring and ask questions. But I'm a point of contact to fix the problems. So even if people didn't ask a question, they'll say, it's okay, I'll call them later. It created teamwork and trust. And that's one of the critical reasons why Qantas came out with a brand stronger. You see, the media have this attitude, and it's apt at the moment. If it bleeds, it leads. You hear every bit of bad news, and it overwhelms you. Another reason to invert the logic and look at all the amazing good things that are happening around us. You know, we've never been wealthier and had so much around us. To warn the passengers, the media are going to come up and say, Qantas is a lousy airline, Rolls-Royce with rotten engines, all these terrible things.
All these things.
Here are the facts. I haven't spoken to Qantas. The other pilots are doing that. I'm telling you what's happened. You're the most knowledgeable people in the world. I'm telling you all this stuff of why we didn't evacuate you down the stairs. So please go out, and if the media say something, please feel free to correct them, because you know more than anyone else on earth about what's happened on this flight. So we empowered them, and the media suddenly realised they couldn't find a bad way to position it all. They all tried, saying the cabin crew was scared, you're on fire. And the passengers said no. There wasn't one passenger I've seen that I saw. I still have not seen one picture of it, one passenger of the 440 passengers crying anywhere in the world when they went home, right? So this, in the after, to the right of bang, give reasons, give briefs, do a personal guarantee, make yourself contactable, and you don't even have to deliver, but you can change the total outcome of a crisis just by showing that you communicate and care.
Yeah, we find the fear factor causes organisations particularly and leaders in those worst case crises to withhold or try and hold back from that communication, that third part of aviate, navigate, communicate. But communicating a crisis is so crucial because that voice coming from the leadership really allays any further fears for the organisation and the people and stakeholders that are involved. Often the challenge, though, is that the fear is driven by a legal obligation or a concern if they do say something wrong. Was that fear in the back of your mind when you're talking to, I know when you're talking to the passengers, for example, that may not have been there, but post the event in particular, was there any sort of fears in the back of your mind about what you could or couldn't say or how you would or wouldn't embrace the lessons from this particular
I was
situation?
writing, at the time of QF32, I was writing a technical book on big jets. I'd been to the Rolls-Royce production site in Derby in the UK 10 days before the engine blew up. And I'd been interviewing all the test pilots at Airbus. I knew this aircraft backwards. I was confident in my mind about just about every decision I made. So when it came to talking to the passengers later, there really wasn't anything that I couldn't answer because everything had been thought through. So I was happy to give the facts. Now, no one was hurt. If someone was hurt, that gets complicated, doesn't it?
It does.
As to what you say. And so I must, you must acknowledge that. But no one was hurt. And I decided, and the facts were clear to me, so I told the facts. Everyone with a mobile phone in a crisis is a journalist.
They are.
And even if you think you've got the golden hour for the company to get the communications together, take control, no, they've lost it. When at the bang.
Not anymore.
At the bang, the whole world's up to date. With social media, it's on YouTube, it's on Twitter straight away. So there's no golden hour, and you've got a choice. Do you say nothing and let the rumours and innuendos get out and just destroy you? Or do you get the facts out to shut down rumours? So the National Transport Safety Bureau in America criticised the Australian Transport Safety Bureau because there were so many rumours about QF32. People were starting to freak out. They're saying, I can't believe this happened. This is terrible. Ground all the, ground Airbus all worldwide. And the ATSB said, no, we've got facts. They publish facts on a daily basis to shut down the rumours. The American Transport Safety Bureau said, you can't do that. You've got to wait to 30 days. The ATSB said, no, this is a new world. We have to shut down the rumours. The NTSB didn't just agree with that, that when an aircraft hit a wall at a runway in San Francisco a few years after that, there were lots of rumours that came out, and the NTSB shut them down straight away. They were coming out with facts. As to how many facts you put out, who knows? But the facts are never disputed, are they?
No,
they're facts. So I think it can't hurt to put the facts out because they will eventually come out.
Oh, well, John Connolly said in your interview with him that the truth is the best tool in the crisis, and I couldn't agree more. because that challenge, again, if you're the one leading with the facts, if you're the ones that are leading with what is actually happening, it starts to allay or take away or undermine any sort of basis of rumour that might exist.
Well, there was a crash of an Air India 787 about a year ago, and the authorities have not been releasing sufficient facts.
And the one person walked away from that one. Was that the one?
One person
miraculously
walked away. But
yeah.
they have facts they have not released. It's just created more doubt and uncertainty, and it has not been handled well.
I think the other thing that you mentioned, though, about the way that you did communicate, particularly with those most important stakeholders in that moment, whether you deliberately did that or not, the point is you've got your crew, you've got people around you that are working to support you in that moment you're working on the response with. The passengers became an important stakeholder group there.
They became a team.
They became part of the team.
They started to work with us.
Exactly.
You see evacuations where people take luggage and cause chaos.
Yeah.
The passengers didn't.
Yeah.
And the passengers were absolutely part of the team. And I can't stress this enough.
Yeah.
You see when a telco, the internet goes down, and all the customers are critical. The passengers were the most critical thing to turn the media story from being bad news to good news. The media realised the only story they could get anyone to support in the passengers was a happy story. Yeah. So that's why QF32 became such a happy story.
Yeah.
Because the passengers. So if you can get your customers on side after that crisis, they will protect you.
Could not agree more. We try and do that with our clients when we're preparing for these crises. We're running simulations for these exercises, but no one can really prepare you for the pressure, especially the key decisions that you're making that influence or impact the outcome. One of the key decisions you made in this one was about staying on the ground and staying in the aircraft against all, I suppose, urges to leave that aircraft or disembark very quickly. How important was that engagement with the stakeholders, your passengers in that moment, to enable you to maintain calm for another 2 hours while you're sitting, or 2.5 hours while you're sitting on the tarmac?
If in doubt, evacuate. That's the general rule.
Yep.
But if you do the research on evacuations, and there's a great story of a Virgin aircraft that evacuated in Manchester in about 2016, and of 330 passengers, 55 are in hospital. Yeah. Including 40 women who were wearing pantyhose. And when you get to the bottom of the evacuation slide, the friction devices slow you down, heats up their pantyhose, fuses it into their skin, right? So there's 40 women with third-degree burns. Yeah. That's from a 330, which is lower, only 300 passengers. We've got a high A380, 440 passengers. We've got fuel on the ground. We've got an engine we can't shut down. We've got firemen, fire trucks. In that San Francisco crash that I talked about earlier, they covered one person in foam by accident and then ran over them and killed them. There are so many threats. So when we were facing with that on the ground, there's fuel, 4 tons of fuel pouring out of the wing near hot breaks, right? So people say, it's going to catch fire, get them out. Just no question, get them out. If we did, I reckon we would have killed people. We got people, grandparents coming back to see the family in Australia from England. Yeah. They're 90 years old, they came on in a wheelchair, and we're going to send them down an 8-metre high slide onto concrete. It wouldn't work out. So it's risk. You have to understand risk. It's an element of resilience. Risk is the probability times the consequence. And some of the consequences would have been, I think, death. All those threats that I've talked about, the good things. We know that we can evacuate any aircraft using half the exits, the full of passengers, in 90 seconds. So the A380 is certified for 853 passengers to get off half the exits in 90 seconds. A fire will double in size about every 90 seconds. We've got 8 fire trucks surrounding us that are challenged. They're not to protect the aircraft. They're to put water onto the passengers so they don't catch fire coming down the slides. So understanding the time, understanding the flame speed for kerosene is about 30 metres in a minute compared to 100 metres or 200 metres for gasoline. You have to understand how fast the flame moves. You build up all this knowledge and you can now dynamically calculate risk, right? And that's what pilots are. We are really good at calculating probability consequence. So we understood even if the aircraft started to catch fire, we could get them out in probably 40 seconds. But here's something else. People said, no, the fuel's pouring onto hot brakes. And we said, well, why do you say the fuel's pouring onto hot brakes? They said, well, the brakes were hot and there's fuel gushing out. I said, yes, the fuel was gushing out, and yes, well, the brakes, we actually couldn't see the sensors that wasn't reading. Some brakes were beyond white hot, right? Yeah. And the fuel will ignite at about, the auto ignition is about 160 degrees. So all these could support saying, no, get them off.
Yeah.
Never presume. Yeah. We didn't find out till 4 months after QF32 that all the brakes on the left-hand gear strut underneath that fuel leak never came on. Those brakes were cold.
Never
the
worked.
sensors were cut.
Yeah.
People are assuming they were hot.
Yeah.
When you have a crisis, focus on the facts. Don't assume or presume. It might send you in the wrong direction. If we had evacuated because of an assumption that those hot brakes, we might have just killed someone. The brakes were cold, and we found out 4 months later that our decision was absolutely correct. Isn't that interesting?
It's fascinating.
Do not assume in a crisis.
Yes, yeah. It's one of the difficulty, though, in that moment, to be fair, is the information overload that you're dealing with. So how did you as a crew work your way through that, and how did you use them to help you come to those decisions?
Right, in the human factors courses that airlines do, and I'm sure it's into the military as well, you learn ways to make decisions. And there are many acronyms for the system. Qantas has a thing called GRADE: gather the information, review the information, assess it, decide, and then execute. Right? Now, I modify that, and in the book I say it's I-GRADE. Yeah. So I identify the problem. A lot of times people misidentify the problem. You know, you follow a checklist for low oil pressure, not actually realising the engine's failed. You should be doing an engine failure checklist, but you're looking at the low oil pressure. Yeah. So identify the problem and also evaluate at the end. And if it's not working, which means if you're surprised or if things aren't going to plan, go back and redo the decision. There's no room for pride in making decisions. Pilots must make decisions quickly. Now, you want to get all the information to make the right decision. But if you find out that it's not the right one, change it. Yeah. Right? And so some people are afraid of changing decisions. So that decision loop, which is a long loop, that was the longest decision loop for a decision in the whole QF32 event. Yeah. It was going continuously for 2 hours. Yeah. We had the cabin crew at the doors ready to evacuate down the slides if things went bad, but they didn't. Yeah. And we were in that decision loop. Everyone's inputting information. We're doing I-GRADE, just continuously for 2 hours, and we could respond in seconds if things went bad. But that understanding that loop, whether you call it I-GRADE or there are many other acronyms to describe what other people want to do, that long decision loop is really important to gather all the information from all the people who have it. You know, my perception of what we're doing now is very different to yours and very different to the people who's doing the audio visual. So you've got to get all these perceptions together, get all the facts, and then if you've got the right facts, analyze and make a decision, decide, execute, and then go back again. Okay, are things going to plan? Are we surprised? That was the most complicated decision, whether to evacuate or not. It was a 2-hour continuous decision, and we made the right decision.
We find that there's often a focus on one outcome or one solution in decision-making, particularly when you've got teams coming together, you've got a cognitive biases or team biases coming together into a situation, or groupthink affecting it. What's a tip that you'd give to our audience in particular about how they can manage concurrent planning and concurrent execution in some circumstances in order to build and create time and space?
It's important that the leader really isolates themselves and sit down with no distractions. Get a cup of tea, just observe, talk to people, delegate. Leader shouldn't really do anything, right? Or just get all information, delegate everything, and be the focal point of that situation. You want to create time, right? And people often don't realize they have more time available.
You're right.
If you're in a car and something's going wrong, stop. If you're in a boat and something goes wrong, drop the anchor. If you're in an aircraft and something goes wrong, go into a holding pattern. What would you do in the army? You would...
pause again, take cover. So
find time.
Something to create that time and space.
And then you load shed the trivial things, and then you focus and prioritize. The other thing that's really important in a crisis, and And we're in Victoria where we're now, the guy takes the mark and then the horn sounds the end of the game, and now everyone at the grand final is watching this one player who's going to do a kick to the goal, and that'll decide the game with the whole state watching.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say the whole country watching, Richard. But
Well, the whole country, certainly me, right? Okay, so what is one of the first things that football player now has to kick for the goal that's going to decide the grand final, and everyone's watching? What's one of the things he does up front? It's breathing, right? Breathing is critical in a crisis. You can be hyperventilating and you're burning off the oxygen, you're getting a bit faint. So breathing is everything, getting your cognitive senses back. And there are terms like the box breathing technique, 3 seconds in, 3 seconds hold, 3 seconds out.
Yeah.
Look, if I'm running, my mouth's open and I'm getting air as quick as I can, your body, there's a psychological pumping of senses with your mouth open.
Yeah.
So breathe through your nose. That calms you down. Breathe slowly, the box technique. And when I do presentations and I talk about QF32, I am stressed. I'm living the situation in the cockpit.
Reliving it.
And then I say, now I have to talk to the passengers, and I'm far too stressed. You do not want me to pick up a microphone and talk to passengers now. I would scare them in the state that I'm in. So here's what I do. And I go through the box breathing technique on the stage, and my whole sense of calm comes down. But breathe through the nose for the reason I've said. It's neuroscience. And breathe slowly. Take control of yourself cognitively, calm, and then that guy will hit the goal. And that's why now, with all these sports, tennis, you see it very well, all these players are really calm, all right? They're unflappable. This breathing is important whether you're kicking a goal or you're in the special forces.
The metaphor for the goal kicking, though, is a ripper on its own, though, too, because the other thing that they always do, and the ones that are really good at goal kicking, is that they'll go through their process. So they'll have a routine that they're following every time. It's their own mental checklist, which gets them back into the moment. Now, this is how many steps I need to take back from the mark. This is how many steps I'm going to take back with the ball. I'll move the ball in the hands a certain way, a certain amount of time.
And they're probably been doing those movements in bed, getting ready for it.
Yeah, if they miss one of those on their own mental checklist, that's when they start to get thrown out.
Now, you see, we're talking about resilience, and many times we have gone into the human factors or the neuroscience, and that's why the neuroscience is so important. If you want to be an effective leader, understanding how teams are formed, how you maintain a team, how people work efficiently, all those 8 elements resolve on you understanding the human factors.
As a finishing factor for us, for the audience and for the teams out there, the work that you're doing now with organisations, both speaking, the keynote speaking that you're doing, the book example for QF32 and Fly, what is some of the key tips that you want to really reinforce with leaders out there who want to build their own resilience and build the resilience of their organisations moving forward? It's
a good question, and I think I'm going to spend another 2 hours to answer it. To be honest, that's why I wrote the second book, Fly. Fly is the subtitles, the elements of resilience. Flying means being not just surviving a crisis when it happens, but when it doesn't happen, you actually thrive. Because you're taking up opportunities. You have to embrace risk, right? If you don't take a gamble, you embrace risk knowing that you're going to make errors, but that's okay. Look at Elon Musk, the way he approaches it. NASA approached risk with Apollo, saying we can't afford to fail. They had unlimited money. Elon Musk approaches space, saying we're going to fail our way up. And both work. I mean, no one's still gone back to the moon in 60 years since Apollo. So isn't that amazing? I mean, if you have a vape that has a processor, and a vape has a processor that has 20 times the processing capability of the Apollo guidance computer that got Neil Armstrong and Buzz onto the 12 astronauts to the moon and back. And no one's replaced that. So Apollo was shit machinery. With resilient humans that could handle any failure. Space today is the most extraordinary computers, and maybe the astronauts are told don't touch anything. The resilience is swung the other way. It's an interesting way to look at it. But to be honest, that question is you can only answer by saying you have to understand human factors, and there are 8 elements of resilience that are all critical, and one of them is crisis management, which is boom and left of boom and right of boom. So it's a wonderful field. I absolutely love it because it addresses everything in humanity and everything that makes humanity great. Because if people don't have those skills, then they will fail along the way.
I think that it's particularly poignant now we're dealing with AI and that change that's happening now. If we don't have resilient humans that are in the loop on managing or QAing those sort of AI tools, etc., then I think we're also in a challenge point for how resilient those things are going to be in the future. We can't rely on that resilience, can we?
Well, that's a great question. I think AI is extraordinary. Now, all the older people have the knowledge and the training experience, and
they've built up over years and stress-proofed.
I'll write a letter. I use AI all the time.
Yeah.
AI is critical. AI is essential, right?
Yeah.
So I write a letter, then feed it to AI saying, improve it. It might fix the errors, the spelling, the punctuation, give me some ideas. And I can edit that in a flash, almost real time, then going bang, 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 perfect.
Yeah.
Right? Now, because I've got a sense of reasonableness based on knowledge, training, experience.
And you've done that task
to
thousands
work out
of times
when the AI is hallucinating.
Yeah.
I don't care. It's obviously nonsense. I just take it out.
Yeah.
But a person without knowledge, training, experience with AI get all this stuff. They can't separate the chaff from the wheat. They get confused, or maybe they even publish the AI as it is, which will embarrass them. So AI is the most phenomenal tool. I think AI, we're in generation 0.1 of 10.
Yeah.
And because AI at the moment, we're almost looking at AI like a mainframe computer where the cloud is a mainframe and we're logging onto a mainframe. No, cloud, we're now looking very in the next year, cloud's moving to PCs that you'll have. You'll have your own AI on your laptop with your own knowledge in it, and it's going to empower you. And providing you can separate the chaff from the wheat, which you can because you have the elements of resilience, it'll be a great tool and it will make you better. A person with AI is going to be much better than a person without AI, but it still is a tool like any automation. And the challenge of pilots is knowing when the automation doesn't work, identify it doesn't work, what computer's at fault, and turn it off. Some pilots are afraid to turn computers off. So if you're happy to work with AI as a tool, you'll be unstoppable, and you're about to get it onto your watch or the Alexa at home. It's going to change our lives. It is a most fantastic opportunity.
Well, Richard, thank you so much for sharing some of those insights and experiences that you've lived through. Your story of resilience in the face of adversity is one that we can all learn for in every aspect of work and life, but particularly in our field in crisis management and crisis preparedness. So thank you for taking the time, and thanks for the insights that you've shared with us today.
Oh, Grant, thank you very much. It's been great to talk about resilience, and it's wonderful what you do in helping all these organisations identify the ways to become resilient and be better. You've been resilient in your life in the military, and it's great to see you passing those pearls on to the industry. Thank you, well done, and good luck.
Thank you. Team, just a short moment just to wrap up here. Fly was the book that we were speaking with Richard de Crespigny about. It's an amazing book about resilience and the elements of resilience and how you can build it within yourselves, your organisations and your teams. If you're interested in a copy, please reach out to us at Left of Boom, and Richard will sign a copy and get that through to you. If you're interested in a masterclass with Richard and myself, then please reach out to Grant at leftofboom.com.au, and we'll be able to get some details to you about upcoming opportunities. Should you wish to reach out to Richard de Crespigny for any speaking opportunities or for keynote presentations, please reach out via richardd@aeronaut.biz. That is richardd@aeronaut.biz.